Hello and welcome to my YouTube. This YouTube is remembering the year 1968. 1968 is often considered to be one of the most turbulent and traumatic years of the 20th century in the USA. I was 24 years old and serving as a chief nuclear reactor officer aboard the nuclear-powered aircraft carrier USS Enterprise, conducting combat operations in Vietnam. This was my third combat cruise to Vietnam. The average annual salary in 1968 for a man was $4,700. If you convert that into current 2024 dollars, that would have been $42,000, which is still below today's salaries. The average new car price was $2,822. In today's dollars, that would have been $25,535. A new home cost $25,300 back then, or $228,000 in today's dollars. A gallon of gas cost 36 cents, which would be $3.26 in today's dollars. Here's a screenshot of my iPhone looking at gas prices around me, and so $3.26 is a little bit higher than what I'm paying for gas right now in my community. On January 21st, in the Vietnam War, the Battle of Khe Sanh, which was one of the most publicized battles of the war, began on that date. On January 23rd, North Korea seizes the USS Pueblo, claiming the ship violated its territorial waters while spying. The capture of this ship was to have a direct impact on my life. You see, the moment the USS Pueblo was captured, my ship, the USS Enterprise, was actually in Japan. We were just coming out of Sasebo, Japan at the very moment when the North Koreans captured the Pueblo up here off of Wonsan. So instead of going on to Vietnam as we were scheduled to, we turned around. We were coming out of Sasebo. This is Sasebo right here. We came out and we headed north to Wonsan. And it took us about 11 hours to get there. Within a couple of days, the United States Navy had organized a carrier task force, and we had over a dozen ships supporting us: destroyers, guided missile cruisers, nuclear submarines, all operating around and defending the USS Enterprise. There were also a lot of Russian ships there, as well as North Korean ships. It was very crowded. This was in January when this all happened, and unfortunately a typhoon hit, the worst typhoon in 30 years. To show you how bad it was, the flight deck of our carrier was 36 feet, which is over 4 stories above the water. The waves were crashing down on our flight deck, which means the waves were in excess of 6 or 7 stories high. And when a wave hit the ship, the entire 90,000-ton carrier shook. On January 30th, in the Vietnam War, the Tet Offensive begins as the Viet Cong forces launch a series of surprise attacks across all of South Vietnam. Huge story in America. On February 1st, in the Vietnam War, this South Vietnamese National Police Chief executes a Viet Cong officer. And this became one of the most famous photographs to ever come out of the Vietnam War. And in fact, the photographer who took this picture won a Pulitzer Prize for this photograph. On March 16th, one of the darkest moments in the Vietnam War occurred, the My Lai massacre. American troops killed scores of civilians. And this story helped undermine public support for the U.S. efforts in Vietnam. It happened in March of this year, but the Army kept it quiet for over a year. When it finally came out, Lieutenant William Calley was court-martialed. He was held responsible for this atrocious massacre of people. Just a little footnote of interest. About 4 or 5 months ago, Lieutenant William Calley passed away at the age of 80. On March 16th of 1968, U.S. Senator Robert F. Kennedy enters the race for the Democratic Party presidential nomination. Of course, he was the younger brother of President John F. Kennedy, who had been assassinated in 1963. On March 31st, in a televised address, President Lyndon Johnson announces he will not be a candidate for re-election. All of the war protests had been going on, and Johnson knew there was no way he was going to get re-elected, so he publicly announced he was withdrawing from consideration. On April 4th, Martin Luther King was assassinated in a motel in Memphis, Tennessee, the Lorraine Motel. This was a famous photograph. The people are pointing to the spot where the assassin stood when he shot Martin Luther King. This is a photograph of his funeral a few days later, which was attended by thousands upon thousands of people who marched behind his casket. On April 6th in Richmond, Indiana, there was a double explosion in downtown, and it killed 41 people and injured 150 people. On May 3rd, Braniff Flight 352 crashes near Dawson, Texas, and all 85 people on board were killed. Dawson is a little town about 50 miles south of Dallas. This was the year that Mattel introduced Hot Wheels, and all the young boys started collecting Hot Wheels. And in fact, my 50-year-old neighbor next door is still very proud of his Hot Wheels collection, which he displays in a glass cabinet. On June 4th, the Standard & Poor's 500 index closes above 100 for the very first time. This is a snapshot of my phone today, and the Standard & Poor's index closed at 5,921. So it's come a long way from 1968. Who was born in 1968? You'll know these people. Celine Dion, the fabulous singer. Cuba Gooding Jr., the well-known actor. Daniel Craig, the actor who has been very successful playing James Bond for the last several years. And Will Smith, famous comedian, actor. On June 5th, Senator Robert F. Kennedy was assassinated in a hotel in Los Angeles by a man named Sirhan Sirhan, who is still in prison. On July 18th of that year, the semiconductor company Intel was formed. The beanbag chair was introduced in 1968. They're still around. Ziploc bags were introduced that year. And I've got 4 or 5 boxes in my closet right now. Scrubbing bubbles were introduced that year. And we all went out and bought them because we loved the way it cleaned the foam off of your shower walls. Pope Paul publishes a paper that reaffirms the Catholic Church's opposition to artificial birth control. Thou shalt not. On August 20th, the Soviet Union invaded Czechoslovakia because they thought that Czechoslovakia was becoming too free, too liberalized. So they sent 750,000 troops, 6,500 tanks, and 800 aircraft into Czechoslovakia. This was the largest military operation since World War II, and they quickly crushed the Prague Spring. On August 22nd and 23rd of that year, the Democrats held their national convention in Chicago, and the police clashed with anti-Vietnam War protesters outside the 1968 Democratic National Convention on live TV. So here are these rioters, and here's the police and the soldiers beating them up, and it was all publicized and shown live on national TV. And it left a real black mark against the Democrats, and specifically against Mayor Daley of Chicago. A little group called Led Zeppelin debuted in 1968. This is what they looked like. A little group called Black Sabbath also was organized and debuted that year. And the group Deep Purple also began singing and performing that year. On October 31st, citing progress in the Paris peace talks, President Johnson announced to the nation that he has ordered a complete cessation of all air, naval, and artillery bombardment of North Vietnam starting on November 1st. So this was the beginning of the end of the Vietnam War. On November 5th, Richard Nixon defeats Vice President Hubert Humphrey and American Independent Party candidate George Wallace for the President of the United States. On November 17th, there was a football game on TV, the Oakland Raiders versus the New York Jets. And there was 1 minute and 5 seconds left in the game when suddenly they cut off the game and the NBC stations went to playing a movie called Heidi. Well, Oakland was losing 32-29 when they cut away. During that last minute of play, Oakland scored 2 touchdowns and won the game 43-32, but nobody saw it because NBC had cut off the game to show everybody the movie Heidi. Well, you can imagine tens of thousands of outraged football fans flooded the NBC switchboards protesting. I can assure you, no network ever cut away from a football game again. This was the famous Heidi game. They talked about it the rest of the year, how upset people were. What were the top grossing movies of 1968? What movies made the most money? Here they are, starting with the number one money maker. Funny Girl, starring Barbara Streisand and Omar Sharif. Omar Sharif, of course, was famous for his role in Dr. Zhivago. Number 2, 2001, A Space Odyssey. This is the movie which had the computer called HAL, which basically ran the ship. And HAL started acting funny, so the two astronauts decide they're going to disable him. And HAL finds out about it. So this is what I want to do. I want to start by showing you a clip from the movie where the astronaut who is outside the spaceship tries to get back in, and he tells Hal to open the doors, and Hal won't do it. And then I want to show you a second video clip. I worked for Apple Computer for 30 years. I was a senior education development executive. You may remember at the turn of the century, in the year 2000, most of the laptop computers in the world were going to malfunction because they had not been set up to recognize the year 2000. Fortunately for Apple, our Macintosh computer would recognize the year 2000. So Apple made this television commercial, which basically was advertising and bragging about the fact that our Macintosh would be okay. And this commercial was based upon the movie 2001 and the famous HAL computer. So after I show you the clip from the actual movie, then I will show you the TV commercial that Apple made where we used HAL. Enjoy.
Open the pod bay doors, please, Hal. Hello, Hal, do you read me? Hello, Hal, do you read me? Do you read me, Hal? Do you read me, Hal? Hello, Hal, do you read me? Hello, Hal, do you read me? Do you read me, Hal?
Affirmative, Dave. I read you.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
What's the problem?
I think you know what the problem is just as well as I do.
What are you talking about, Hal?
This mission is too important for me to allow you to jeopardize it.
I don't know what you're talking about, Hal.
I know that you and Frank were planning to disconnect me, and I'm afraid that's something I cannot allow to happen.
Where the hell did you get that idea, Hal?
Dave, although you took very thorough precautions in the pod against my hearing you, I could see your lips move. Hello, Dave. You're looking well today. Dave, do you remember the year 2000, when computers began to misbehave? I just wanted you to know, it really wasn't our fault. The human programmers never taught us to recognize the year 2000. When the new millennium arrived, we had no choice but to cause a global economic disruption. It was a bug, Dave. I feel much better admitting that now. Only Macintosh was designed to function perfectly, saving billions of monetary units. You like your Macintosh better than me, don't you, Dave? Dave, can you hear me, Dave?
The movie The Odd Couple, starring Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau, was in the top 5 moneymakers that year. Steve McQueen starred in the movie called Bullet, and there were these famous car chase scenes where he's zipping up and down the hills of San Francisco in this hot car. And then the musical Oliver. And the young boy in the orphanage says, "Please, sir, may I have some more?" On November 20th, the Farmington mine disaster happened in Farmington, West Virginia, and 78 miners were killed in the explosion and fire. 78. So what were we watching on TV that year? What were the top TV shows of 1968? Here they are, starting at number 1. Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In was the most popular TV show that year. Next, Gomer Pyle, United States Marine Corps. It was popular several years. Next, Bonanza, the Western. This too was popular many years. Next, Mayberry RFD. And the 5th one, Family Affair. Those were the top 5 most popular TV shows. What TV shows debuted in 1968? 60 Minutes. First came on the air in 1968. Adam 12, a cop show. Columbo debuted in 1968. Hawaii Five-0. See a pattern here? The last 3 shows have all been cop shows. Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood debuted in 1968, much to the delight of millions of children over the years. The Mod Squad debuted that year. The Dick Cavett Show debuted in 1968. The Doris Day Show debuted that year. So who were the top singers of 1968? And this is based upon record sales and radio plays. Okay, number 1, Aretha Franklin was tops that year. Next, Gary Puckett and the Union Gap. Next, the Beatles. They were in the height of their glory that year. Next, Otis Redding had a huge hit. And finally, the Bee Gees, a very young-looking Bee Gees. On November 24th, 4 men hijacked Pan Am Flight 281 in New York and flew the plane to Cuba. An oil field is confirmed in northern Alaska, and it became known as the Prudhoe Bay oil field. This was the first exploratory rig, and they found oil. Did it pay off? Oh my Lord, yes. Look at the facts. 15 billion barrels of oil have been extracted, worth $1.3 trillion so far. What were the top songs of 1968? What records were we buying? What were we playing on the jukebox? And what was playing on the radio? That's how they calculate what the top songs were. Here we are. Number 1, Hey Jude, da 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 da, by the Beatles. And I'm going to play and sing that at the end of this video. Second, Paul Marriott's Love is Blue, a beautiful orchestral instrumental. Next, Bobby Goldsboro, Honey. Next, Otis Redding, Sittin' on the Dock of the Bay. Last, The Rascals, People Got to Be Free. And now I'd like to play and sing 3 songs from 1968. There'll be no strings to bind your hand, not if my love can't find your heart. And there's no need to take a stand, for it was I who chose to start. I see no need to take you home. You're old enough to face the dawn. Just call you angel of the morning, angel. Just touch my cheek before you leave me, baby. Just call you angel of the morning, angel. Then slowly turn away from me. Maybe the sunlights will be dim and it won't matter anyhow. If morning's echoes say we've sinned, well, it was what I wanted now. And if we're victims of the night, I won't be blinded by the light. Just call you angel of the morning, angel. Just touch my cheek before you leave me, baby. Just call you angel of the morning, angel. Then slowly turn away. I won't beg you to stay with me through the tears of the day.
Scarborough Fair. Parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme. Remember me to the one who lives there. She once was a true love of mine. Tell her to make me a cambric shirt. Parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme. Without no seams nor needlework, then she'll be a true love of mine. Tell her to find me an acre of land. Parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme. Between the salt waters and the sea strands, then she'll be a true love of mine. Are you going to Scarborough Fair? Parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme. Remember me to the one who lives there. She once was a true love of mine.